"They're holding us back," Julian said, sliding the termination papers across the polished oak table. "We're bringing in consultants with fresh perspectives." I didn't blink. I just nodded once. Not because I agreed, but because I had already started the countdown. "My name is Carter Ames. I'm 47. For nearly 2 decades, I was the senior systems architect at Darrowtech, a tech firm that once prided itself on engineering brilliance over buzzwords. I joined when we were just 7 people sharing a windowless office over a laundromat in Boise. No HR, no budgets, just code, coffee, and wild ambition. 18 years. That's how long I gave them. Not just clocking in and out, I built what they sell. The company's proprietary platform, that was me. Nights and weekends, debugging memory leaks while my wife Karen dozed off on the couch with a book on her chest. When our servers crashed the morning of her father's funeral, I missed the burial to get them running again. She forgave me. That was the kind of woman she was. You don't last that long in a place like Darrowtech without sacrifice. I missed recitals, games, whole summers. Our son Caleb used to draw pictures of me at my desk with 4 screens and coffee cups everywhere. I still have one on my office wall. A crayon sketch where I look more robot than Dad. But I wasn't bitter. I believed in what we were building. I turned down headhunter calls and offers that dangled higher salaries like candy. Loyalty mattered. At least it used to. Over time, I became the guy they called when everything broke. When a client's system failed on a Sunday morning, they didn't call the new cloud integration manager. They called Carter. I was the one who knew the back doors. We'd buried in legacy code. The patches nobody documented. The systems we jerry-rigged because funding never came through. They didn't even know half the architecture was still propped up by scripts I wrote on a borrowed laptop. But then the acquisition happened. When the private equity firm swooped in last year, things shifted. Fast. The free Friday lunches turned into virtual wellness seminars. The handwritten thank you notes were replaced with Slack emojis. And then came Julian, our new CEO. Younger, polished, fluent in consultant speak. He didn't ask what the systems needed. He asked how we could scale efficiencies and streamline redundancies. I wasn't surprised when he showed up with a pair of consultants from some boutique firm in San Francisco. One of them glanced at my terminal and said, "Wow, people still use this syntax?" I just smiled and kept typing. That's the thing about legacy systems. Just like legacy people, they hold secrets nobody else knows how to use. Back when I joined Darrowtech, we weren't even called that. We were Quantum Interface Solutions, a name that sounded like a college project. There was no funding, no press, no plan. Just Harold Darrow, his cousin Lou, and 5 of us coding in shifts, living off vending machines and blind optimism. I remember wiring our first rack server with parts we pulled from eBay. The internet would drop every time someone microwaved leftovers. But we built, and we got noticed. The first big client came after I patched a logistics platform overnight during a blizzard. Word spread. Contracts followed. So did pressure. By year 5, we had office space. By year 7, we had departments. By year 10, we had a culture committee. But we never had documentation. We had me. I became the human archive, not out of ego, but out of necessity. And then came the investors. And then came Julian. The signs didn't come all at once. That's the thing about being phased out. It's not a single slap. It's 100 small cuts you pretend not to feel. First, they moved my office. Said they were repurposing space. Suddenly, I was next to the break room where the microwave beeped every 90 seconds and someone always burned popcorn. Then came the skipped invites. Weekly engineering huddles without my calendar on them. Julian's all-hands presentations with diagrams of new infrastructure that looked suspiciously like my architecture, minus the credit. I noticed junior hires started reporting to consultants instead of to me. Bright kids, full of buzzwords. But I could see it in their eyes. They were overwhelmed. One of them, Alex, pulled me aside one evening and said, "Carter, I think I just deleted the security layer on the payment gateway." I didn't even know it was a security layer. I stayed late to help him fix it. I didn't rat him out. Why would I? It wasn't his fault they threw him into the deep end without showing him where the ladder was. Meanwhile, I'd get emails from Julian with subject lines like, "Aligning legacy with vision." I stopped opening them. They were just euphemisms, translations. "You're not part of the future." One afternoon, I walked past the war room and heard my name. "We need to replace Carter's dependencies with something modular," one of the consultants said. I kept walking. They weren't talking about code. They were talking about me. That's when I started printing things, quietly, just in case. After the layoff, there were no dramatic scenes, no shouting, no threats. I signed the papers, nodded, and walked out with my box. But I wasn't leaving. Empty-handed. At home, I powered up my personal server. Yeah, I keep one in the garage. Karen calls it the bunker. On it, I had mirrored the evolution of Darrowtech's architecture over the years. Not because I planned revenge, not then. Just habit. I document everything, dates, code changes, permissions. Every undocumented hotfix I made to keep the systems breathing when budgets got slashed. 3 days later, I got a text from Alex. "Systems glitching. Can't find the payment gateway layer again. They're panicking." I didn't reply. That night, Julian called. I didn't pick up. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. They had chosen fresh perspectives. Let them see how fresh performs under pressure. By the end of the week, 3 departments had reported back-end anomalies. Julian sent a mass email with phrases like "unexpected latency" and "integration inconsistencies." I just poured myself a bourbon and opened a notebook titled "Timeline." No anger, just precision. Tucked. Offer came from someone I hadn't seen in years. Micah Branson, CTO at a startup called Nethcore. Back in the day, we'd both spoken at the same regional DevOps conference. He messaged me on LinkedIn, straight to the point. "Carter, I heard what happened. I need someone who's battle-tested. Coffee?" We met at a quiet place off the interstate. No suits, no pitch decks. Just 2 guys who'd spent too many nights staring at terminal logs with coffee that had gone cold. He leaned forward. "I'm not here to take pity. I want your brain, your scars, your ability to build something that won't collapse when a 26-year-old tries to run a cleanup script from Stack Overflow." I didn't say yes right away. I told him I had some loose ends to watch unravel first. Back at home, my inbox was starting to look like a digital panic attack. Alex sent 3 messages in one morning. Another consultant, one who once rolled his eyes at my old syntax, left a voicemail at 2 a.m. asking if I maybe had a copy of the original config files. Julian himself sent a message marked urgent. Subject, short-term consulting possibility. That one made me laugh. I ignored them all. Instead, I called Micah. "Let's talk architecture." The next week, I joined Nethcore as chief systems strategist. Day 1, I walked into a room of engineers half my age. They expected a dinosaur. I showed them resilience, real redundancy, secure access, not just buzzwords, but systems that don't buckle when the unexpected hits. Meanwhile, Darrowtech was unraveling like cheap cable. Their new flagship client portal had launched, without understanding that the load balancing routine was hard-coded, with a time-based handshake that expired every 90 days. A patch I had personally updated. Guess who had the keys? They didn't want me, but they needed me. One of the juniors finally texted, desperate. Julian said, "Name your price." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, out of principle. You don't replace loyalty with efficiency and expect stability. You don't toss 18 years into a recycle bin and ask for help when the lights start flickering. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in building something better. At Nethcore, we weren't chasing consultants. We were crafting legacy. And Darrowtech, they were chasing shadows. It started with a system outage. Nothing major, just a Monday morning hiccup in their invoice API. Then came the real cracks. Payroll didn't process on time. Vendor accounts locked themselves after failing too many login attempts. The customer portal began returning 503 errors during peak hours, and no one could figure out why. I watched it all from a distance. The news reached me through ex-colleagues, some of whom had jumped ship and were now quietly applying at Nethcor. Darrowtech tried everything, hired more consultants, paid a small fortune to a DevOps firm from Austin, spent 2 weeks just trying to decipher code that didn't have a single inline comment. Because I never wrote for machines, I wrote for people. And when those people stopped listening, the system stopped cooperating. Then came the lawsuit. A critical partner, Millwright Group, filed a breach of contract after missing 3 consecutive data reports. Their integration depended on a legacy function I'd flagged for documentation 2 years ago. Julian had ignored it, said we needed to move faster. They tried to reach out again, this time through legal channels. The tone wasn't friendly anymore. It was desperate. They wanted access, wanted explanations, wanted fixes. I gave them silence. They sent a cease and desist. Alleged I withheld company property. I sent a notarized reply through my attorney. All proprietary material in my possession was created independently, using personal resources prior to employment. Karen read the letter and smirked. You always did play the long game. Inside Darrowtech, panic turned into attrition. Mid-level engineers bailed. A few key managers went on extended leave. Even their shiny new CTO quietly updated his LinkedIn headline to open to work. I kept building. Nethcor's infrastructure scaled faster than we expected. Clients came, not just for the tech, but for the calm, for the trust, for the kind of experience you don't outsource to strategy decks. Meanwhile, Darrowtech was bleeding, the funniest part? They still didn't know half of what I'd built until it broke. I didn't go looking for it. The truth found me. It was a former Darrowtech project manager, Clint, who reached out. We hadn't spoken in over a year. His message was short. You were right. I have something you need to see. We met at a diner just outside the city. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He slid a flash drive across the table like he was passing state secrets. This was in the consultant Slack channel, he said. After you were let go, I think you should read it. Back home, I opened the folder. Inside, PDFs, screenshots, call transcripts. What I saw made me grip the edge of my desk. Julian hadn't just restructured for efficiency. He'd orchestrated a full-scale corporate play. The consultants weren't analysts. They were from a shell firm tied to one of Julian's private holdings. They'd been feeding Darrowtech inflated implementation hours, fake infrastructure audits, even licensing proposals for tools they never intended to deploy. The layoffs? Just part of the cleanup. Get rid of the legacy. Cut ties with anyone who knew how the company really ran. People like me. There was even a document, an internal memo from Julian, outlining risk items, listing names. Mine was at the top next to a red tag, non-compliant with new narrative. They feared the knowledge I carried, not because I was difficult, but because I remembered. That's when it all clicked. The silence, the reassignments, the sudden decisions that never made sense. They hadn't just wanted to move fast. They wanted to erase history. Karen found me at my desk that night, hands clenched, screen still glowing. You okay? She asked. I nodded slowly. I'm not angry, I said. I'm awake. The next morning I forwarded the files to a quiet contact in the regulatory board. Not anonymously. Full name, full statement. Let the system do its job. Days later, a subpoena landed at Darrowtech's front desk. 2 more followed. I heard from Clint again. Julian had vanished. Disconnected all company accounts. Resigned via lawyer. Whistleblowers surfaced. A class action. Suit formed. Turns out I wasn't the only one whose contract had been strategically severed. At Nethcor, we watched it unfold like a slow-motion implosion. The story hit the industry blogs. Headlines like, Tech CEO caught in self-dealing, my scheme after purging senior talent. I never commented publicly. Didn't need to. People connected the dots. And for the first time since that conference room meeting, I felt something like peace. Not because they fell, but because the truth rose. Rebuilding wasn't about revenge. It was about purpose. Nethcor. I had something I hadn't felt in years. Latitude. Micah didn't want best practices from the latest Gartner report. He wanted things that worked, things that could take a punch. So I started fresh. Blank whiteboard, no legacy. Code, no duct tape, just the essentials. Resilience, transparency, and speed where it mattered. The first system I designed was for a logistics client that had been burned by 3 previous providers. Their CTO sat across from me during our first call and said, "I don't want flashy, I want reliable." "You'll get both," I told him. Word spread fast. Other companies came knocking. Startups tired of bloat. Mid-size firms hemorrhaging money on over-engineered solutions that never delivered. What I offered wasn't magic. It was clarity. I brought in some of the old guard, people like Clint, even Alex eventually. They came not because they needed a job, but because they missed being useful. We didn't build teams around KPIs. We built around principles, ownership, documentation, mentorship. I personally reviewed every line of code before deployment, not because I didn't trust the team, but because they trusted me to have their back. Karen noticed the change. "You laugh more now," she said one night while I was cooking dinner, something I hadn't done in months. I smiled. I think I finally clocked out of Darrowtech. It wasn't just a new job. It was a new system, not just tech, but how we built tech. A culture where juniors weren't thrown into chaos, where legacy didn't mean outdated. It meant earned. Nethcore doubled in size within a year. We turned profitable without chasing investors. Clients stayed. Engineers didn't quit after 18 months. That's what happens when people feel seen. I never gave a TED Talk, never posted a revenge thread on social media. My name just started showing up, in Slack channels, in inboxes, in board meetings. Whenever someone asked, "Who actually knows? How to fix this?" Respect doesn't arrive in fanfare. It shows up in quiet referrals and long contracts. I was back, but this time, I wasn't just building software. I was building something that could outlast me. It came wrapped in irony and noir. Invitation, formal, logo-branded, CC'd to my new Nethcore email. Subject line, Strategic Synergy Proposal. The sender? Darrowtech Holdings. More precisely, the interim board now tasked with salvaging what was left after Julian's spectacular exit. The message danced around desperation, but the core was simple. They wanted integration with us, with me. They wanted to explore collaborative architecture frameworks across existing infrastructure. Translation: please help fix the mess. Micah and I laughed for a full minute, but I didn't delete the email. Instead, I replied, "Let's talk." We met in a sterile glass building in Denver, opposite of everything Darrowtech used to be. 3 board members, a compliance officer, and a consultant whose tie looked like it had been ironed on. "We're looking for stability," one of them said. "You're looking for credibility," I corrected. There was a pause. Then nods. I laid out terms. Not demands, terms. Nethcore wouldn't be absorbed. There would be no hostile equity moves, no rebranding, no culture overwrite. If they wanted integration, it would be done on our systems, our code, our ethics, and I wouldn't report to anyone. "We're asking you to lead the transition," the chairwoman said. "From both ends." I nodded slowly. "Then I decide what stays and what goes." Agreed. Karen was waiting at home when I told her. She raised an eyebrow. "You're going back?" I smiled. "Not going back, they're coming to me." This wasn't about payback. I had no interest in settling scores. This was about doing it right, teaching them what stability really looked like, what trust really meant, what it cost to ignore people who quietly carry the weight. At the kickoff meeting, I stood in front of a conference room full of new faces, young developers, scared managers, a few familiar eyes. I didn't start with a mission statement. I started with a question. Who here remembers why we build things? Silence. Then one junior raised his hand. To make sure people can rely on something. Exactly, I said. Because that's what leadership looks like. Not dominance, not revenge, direction. The first day I walked back into the old Darrow Tech building, now partially under Nethcore management, nobody clapped. There were no banners, just the soft beep of a keycard reader, and mine turned green. The security guard, same guy from years ago, looked up and blinked. "Carter?" I nodded. Back in a different seat. The offices had changed, new layout, different furniture, but I still recognized the sound the elevator made when it hit the 4th floor. Still remembered the hum of the server room behind. The wall panel they never fixed. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it in the glances, the way the engineers straightened up when I passed by. They weren't afraid. They were relieved. I didn't take the big corner office. I chose a small workspace with glass walls near the tech floor, visibility over vanity. I didn't send mass emails. I didn't make speeches. I just worked. Reviewed. Architecture. Streamlined protocols, mentored juniors, fixed what could be saved, deprecated what couldn't. Not out of ego, but out of duty. Julian's portrait had been removed from the executive hall. No one mentioned him. That was fitting. Every now and then, someone would stop by my office with a quiet question that began with, "Can I ask your opinion on?" And I always said yes. Respect didn't need volume, it just needed presence. I didn't come back to reclaim a title. I came back to make sure the right things stayed standing, and one by one they did. I could have stayed on indefinitely, reaping the results, cementing the legacy. But that's not the point of legacy. So I picked 5 people. Not for their resumes, but for their instincts. Quiet minds, sharp eyes, relentless curiosity. I gave them projects with no roadmaps. I sat back, watched, taught. We met every Friday. No slides, no suits, just whiteboards, black coffee, and hard questions. What if the system fails here? How do you know it's truly secure? What happens when you're the only one who knows the answer? One day, one of them, Jess, 28, whip-smart, said, "You're training us to replace you." I smiled. "No, I'm training you so no one has to be replaced." That was the mission now, not to lead forever, but to make sure no one else ever had. To rebuild from zero in silence again. I never raised my voice, never made a scene, never asked for recognition. But in the end, they knew. Because real value doesn't come from shouting. It comes from showing up, day after day, year after year, until even the silence remembers your name.